For more on this, let's bring in Lisa Sachs. She's director of the Columbia Center on Sustainable Investment and associate professor at Columbia Climate School. Lisa, first, great having you. And second up, is rolling back greenhouse gas regulation economic strategy or environmental negligence? What is it?
Well, it's framed as economic strategy, but of course it is profound environmental negligence. But it's also self-defeating economic strategy, if one can even call it a strategy. It's not a strategy. We're already seeing the huge and mounting economic costs of climate change for households, for public funds, for recovery, for healthcare costs, and then for industries that are already affected by the physical impacts, but also now complete regulatory uncertainty, which is the worst thing for business. So it's profoundly negligent, and it's a self-sacrificing measure. And it sacrifices, by the way, long-term industrial leadership, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But this is hardly an economic strategy.
Do you see environmental protections being reframed? Do you believe that the framing of these protections as barriers to growth rather than public safeguards works or can be made to work?
That is, of course, the narrative, that regulations are bad for growth and that deregulation helps growth. It is disingenuous or profoundly ignorant because the real barriers to growth are increasingly costly and unpredictable impacts and regulatory uncertainty. It is the worst thing for industries, especially industries like automakers and power companies that are making investment decisions now for decades in the future and trying to comply with a now fragmented landscape of regulations, both international regulations versus the US, but also now we're going to see a massively fragmented landscape of regulations within the US, which is the worst possible thing for business. So it is, I mean, deregulation has been, for the past several decades, framed as good for growth. But in this case, that is profoundly inaccurate and really is, this is the worst thing for US industries.
And going further into this, Lisa, could weakening federal climate rules trigger a new wave of investor risk and, above all this, legal uncertainty?
Yeah, there's an irony here, too, which is that arguably the administration thinks that they have eliminated one regulation and therefore reduced compliance costs. But this has just massively expanded legal exposure. First of all, this repeal itself will be tied up in litigation for at least a year. So we won't even know the outcome of this. That's going to be a year of uncertainty with this regulation, but with this repeal. But in the meantime, states and cities around the country are now going to be, especially in response to this, stepping up their own regulation to manage greenhouse gas emissions and efficiency within their own jurisdiction. So U.S. companies are now going to be trying to navigate a landscape of dozens, if not hundreds, of different legal frameworks, and their own legal exposure was originally preempted from individual action because there was EPA authority. Now, when federal authority is contested, it means that there's going to be even greater exposure to individual legal action for nuisance and under other legal doctrines. So this is going to be, this absolutely expands both investor and legal risk.
Lisa Sachs, as usual, thank you for your clarity and insights. Great having you.